Hello everyone and welcome to another card video. We are playing with alcohol inks today, and so I figured I'd go over some things before we made a card. So Ranger makes at least these two different types of Yupo paper. One is larger and is more matte, still glossy but more matte, and this smaller version that is it's more glossy, and you can tell in this video. So they both react very similar with the alcohol inks, but they are different. Then I figured I'd show you my alcohol inks and some of the supplies that we're going to use. I did purchase like a cheap set of brushes just to use with my alcohol inks. That way I didn't damage my watercolor brushes in any way. We are also using some Nuvo Gilding Flakes in this video, and I'll show you how I use them. When you're stamping on glossy paper, stays-on ink is the best thing that you can use. We're also going to heat emboss. This is the awesome stamp set by Neat and Tangled and the awesome die. So I'm showing you how I've been playing with the alcohol inks. You can get different levels of concentration of color depending on how much ink and how much blending solution you use. I really like to put the alcohol inks onto the Yupo paper, blend them out a little bit, and then dry them really quickly with my heat tool. So that was with the blending solution. If you put alcohol inks directly to the Yupo paper and just dry it instantly with your heat tool, that will get a higher concentration of color. Therefore, it's going to be darker. This is Denim and Shell Pink that I'm using. And when you mix those two colors together, you can see like that shade of purple. So I've been just playing with one or two colors on a sheet just to see what I can do. And so the examples that you're going to see today are just two colors. There's nothing more than just the two colors. So the depth and dimension that you see is just from those two colors mixing together. So I've sped it up a little bit because it's really just the same thing over and over, and I'm just showing you how you can create a different flow depending on where you put the alcohol ink and where you put the blending solution and how you dry them. You can certainly air dry it, but I like the look that this gives you. This is the blending pen that is for the alcohol inks. If you put this blender pen to the ink, it almost reacts just like a Copic 0 marker. It takes the color away or pushes it away from the area in which you're using it. So I really like to be able to put like little circles or little lines or little images. This is a very small brush and a bit of the alcohol blending solution on the brush. And when you dip it and then apply it to the paper, you get these little circles. It's really neat. I have a blast making these little circles. And on the black, it shows up really well. So I figured that's how I would show you. But yeah, it's just a little drop of the blending solution onto your alcohol ink project. So now we're going to add some gilding flakes. So I've taken, this is Ranger Multimedia Matte in my little blunt tip syringe, and I'm just adding a bead of color along the lines of this alcohol ink background. Do not breathe when you open these gilding flakes because they will go everywhere. And if you have ever played with them before, I'm sure you understand. But I'm just applying some of the gilding flakes right along where I've beaded the liquid adhesive. And I'm going to let that dry. Pat it down so that it is adhered to the paper and then let it dry. But these gilding flakes are gorgeous and they put off a tremendous amount of shine to your project. It just takes some getting used to when you're playing with them because they can make quite a mess if you're not careful. That was the copper gilding flakes, and this is the gold version. They also have silver, and I'm just applying them, kind of making it like a vein in the project. So now we gotta take off our gilding flakes. So I'm using this fan brush and I'm just roughly shaking off any of the excess gilding flakes that didn't adhere to the paper. I'm being quite rough with this paper, so I don't think you should be afraid of damaging it in any way. Make sure it's dried completely. Let it sit for a few hours and let it dry and adhere to the paper, and then just shake off any of the excess, and it leaves this really beautiful vein of gilding flakes in your alcohol ink project. Those little dots are the gold mixative. Those are concentrated drops of mixative. I haven't really figured out the mixative all that much. It reacts differently than the inks and the blending solution. So these are the projects that I was just playing around with. The one was Shell Pink and Denim. This is Willow and Cloudy Blue. This is Patina and Shell Pink. So in order to stamp a sentiment, I've started using the StazOn. This is white StazOn, and you can stamp, and then you should dry the StazOn and then restamp it. And that way, after multiple times, I'm telling you, like 5 or 6 stampings, it'll get really crisp and white. But we're gonna make a card. So I've started with the matte, the more matte version of the Yupo paper, and this is Willow alcohol ink, and I'm just applying the drops. This is Cloudy Blue alcohol ink and drying them. And depending on how dark or light I want the color, I'm adding or not adding blending solution and drying it with my heat tool. So that's all I'm doing. I'm literally playing with this. There's no rhyme or reason. I really like the colors. I really like the circles that it makes. I like the veining that it makes when the colors blend together. It really makes it almost like a marbled texture or a marbled piece of paper. I'm sure that's why everyone else loves playing with the alcohol inks. So really just play with it. Just have a great time figuring out what you like and what works for you. This is the Ranger Multimedia Matte again, and I'm just adding a vein of gilding flakes. I'm going to use the gold gilding flakes on this project, and I'm going to create 2. Now this background is going to be cut down. So you can, if you mess up on a piece, you can just cut down another section. This piece of paper is much larger than an A2 size card front. So I'm just adding another vein of gilding flakes here. And now that it's dry, and it's really helpful that it's on this Epicurean board, that way I can hold it and I don't get alcohol or gilding flakes all over my hands. But I'm just shaking it off just like I did before and removing all that excess gilding flakes. And you can keep those gilding flakes that are off into your box. If you start quite a collection, you can reuse those. So now I'm figuring out where I want to cut this down. This is a stitched rectangle die, and I'm just cutting it down in an area where I think it looks good. Unfortunately, you can't get 2 backgrounds out of one piece of Yupo paper, but you can save it for something. I'm sure you can figure out something to use it for. So I'm using my powder tool to make sure that none of my embossing powder is going to stick, and I'm using Versamark ink on the You Are So sentiment that I've stamped, and I'm applying some Hero Arts ultrafine embossing powder. And it is really imperative that you try not to warp your paper. So I'm touching it and then moving it away, touching it with the heat tool and moving it away, and that way it doesn't warp the paper too badly. So I'm cutting down a piece of craft foam because I want to pop up this section of this panel of my card. So I'm using some 1/2-inch double-sided adhesive to adhere the piece of craft foam to my panel, and then the panel is getting adhered to a Simon Says Stamp Fog card base. I've cut out the die, the awesome die, multiple times from a piece of Nina 110 cardstock, and I'm adhering all the layers together. I've cut the shadow out of a piece of Stampin' Up gold foil cardstock. So it'll have the white awesome word die on the gold shadow. And depending on the colors that you use in your alcohol ink, you can really just change up all the colors that you're using. So now that I've got all the layers adhered together, we're going to put it on the shadow. Just tiny dots of adhesive all around the background or all around the back of the word die, and then placing it on the shadow and then letting that sit for a few minutes and let it dry. So now we're putting the two pieces together. We have the panel and the word die on our beautiful marbled background, and this is being popped up with Scotch 3M foam tape, and that's it. Enjoy playing with your alcohol inks, and I love seeing everyone's projects, and I hope you enjoyed it.
A tree.
It's a green. Green. Very big.
It looks pretty.
It's green. It is green. It's green and white.
Did you make this mess?
Yeah. I was trying to play.
You were trying to play?
Yeah.
Are you going to clean it up?
No. I was playing with it. Smell it. Wait, I want to smell it.
Where does that go?
Just they hang on the tree like an icicle.
I want to smell it.
They hang on the tree like an
Yeah,
icicle.
just like an ornament.
Daddy,
The
can
way
I
it
smell it?
smells good.
Does it smell good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Put it all the way on, buddy. All the way on.
Take it up.
Uh-huh.
Somewhat perilously.
Found a starfish.
That was Daddy's. That's an old one. We gotta spread them out a little bit.
Dexter's hanging them, so I'm just kind of placing where Dexter's hanging them.
I can hang up still.
Yeah, you just gotta spread them out, buddy.
There we go. It can stay on.
Here's one for you. This one looks like somebody was eating it.
I'm pretty sure Dexter took a bite out of that one.
Chicken.
Right in front of the